As Passover nears, we hope that you've taken the opportunity to be part of our Seder matching program to make sure that you're able to celebrate Passover with some new friends, some other congregants, and are able, if you're able to host anybody that your table can expand. And as we're starting to get closer to Passover, we're beginning to think about our Seder. And the Seder, the Haggadah, the story, the telling of the story of Passover, really has a few different threads of what freedom means. Freedom from the experience of Torah is not really the ability to just do what we want, but the Torah defines freedom as avodat Hashem, the freedom to serve God. And the word avodah means work, but it also means service, or being who we're meant to be in the world. We serve God when we're most fully ourselves, when we're using the gifts that we're given to their fullest capacity to bring qualities of kindness, justice, creativity, and presence into the world. And the contracted form of the word avodah is avdut, which means slavery. When we're not living our true avodah, then we are in avdut. And so in the Haggadah, there are really three different versions of the story that imagine three different versions of avdut, of slavery. The first one opens the section of the Haggadah that says, Avadim chayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim. We were slave to pharaohs in Egypt. And this is really the sense of real physical slavery, that this exists in the world. And I want to just expand this to think about the situation where people are not able in our world to be able to live lives of human dignity. The refugee situation from Afghanistan, from the Ukraine, is horrible and is breaking our hearts every day. And so one part of the telling of the story of Passover is to align ourselves, to open our hearts in compassion to those who are also struggling, and use this Passover time to think about how we can be able to contribute, whether that's our money or our time, to these issues. The second version of slavery is really what we might call the spiritual version. It's the section of the Haggadah that begins, Mitchila uvdei avodah zarah hayu avotenu, which means at first our ancestors engaged in false service. So here the slavery is not physical. It's beginning with Abraham's father and grandfather. Avodah zarah, or false service, is about believing that contentment and wholeness can be found through something outside ourselves: money, sex, power, affirmation, food. When we believe that something, whatever it is, will make everything better, instead of participation and connection to the alive and vibrant source of all life, then we're engaging in idol worship. So one of the things that we can also explore at our Seder this year is, how does our focus on externals and material success and satisfaction keep us from using our gifts to bring kindness, justice, creativity, and presence to the world? What might it mean practically to throw off the yoke of that bondage? So here we have these two different themes. One is physical, one is spiritual, and we can have our Haggadah and our Seder focus on one or more of those themes, or both. The third part of the story that's being told is really the extended midrash that begins, Say ulmad ma bikesh Lavan ha'arami la'asot Yaakov. It says, note well what Lavan the Aramean wanted to do to our ancestor Jacob. And here, slavery doesn't begin with the Pharaoh in the story. It actually begins with Lavan, who wanted to wipe out the entire Jewish nation. By consciously destroying Jacob, the Jewish people could never come into existence. And really here, this is also another reminder that as Jews, we need to continue to make our voice heard. We need to make sure that the narrative that wants to be spinned in the world, that is anti-Semitic, that is against the existence of the state of Israel, that we're constantly engaged in being able to speak the truth of who we are as Jews. Terrorists killed 11 Israelis in the past 2 weeks. The Palestinian Authority and Hamas are actively inciting attacks against Israelis. The Israeli Defense Force chief warns that this terror wave in Israel could lead to attacks on Jewish and Israeli targets worldwide. And an early indication of this took place last week in New York City, where hundreds of pro-Palestinian supporters descended upon buildings of Jewish and pro-Israel organizations and called to globalize the intifada. An activist speaker said that Zionist professors are not welcomed on your campus and compared Russia's atrocities in the Ukraine to the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. We also saw recently in the last couple of weeks that the Middle East Student Association, or MESA, voted to actively boycott Israel to engage in BDS. And although this academic boycott that MESA members voted to endorse seemingly targets only Israeli institutions and scholars, the biggest victims of academic BDS are students and faculty on US campuses. Your and my children. Academic BDS's rejection of the normalization of Israel in the academy not only calls on its faculty endorsers to work towards boycotting educational programs and research opportunities in or about Israel and canceling or shutting down pro-Israel events and activities on campus, but it also urges the censoring, the denigration, the protest, and the exclusion of pro-Israel individuals. So there's a lot that we're holding in the world, and Passover, as we start to move into this awareness of what freedom means and what slavery means on both a personal level and on a global level, this is really the time that we think about what is our avodah, what is our service, what is a way that we can contribute in the world. We know that from the story that it wasn't until the people cried out that God began the process of redemption. And this Passover, we have the opportunity to reflect and share our story personally as a people and as part of the human family of this journey from slavery to freedom.